Hello and welcome to the Vine Life Podcast. I'm Tony Clark, your host, and my special guest today is a Grammy-nominated CMA Award-winner, also the newest member of the Grand Ole Opry, and his name is T. Graham Brown. Now, he recently announced his new studio album titled From Memphis to Muscle Shoals. It will be available Friday, August 2nd via Warner Music Group 88. This new album is currently available for pre-order and is packed with legendary collaborations, including Bettye LaVette, Sam Moore, Delbert McClinton, Dwight Yoakam, Eddie Floyd, Little Anthony, Randy Houser, Sammy Hagar, Tanya Tucker, Wynonna, and Zach Williams. Now, more information about T. Graham Brown can be found at his website, and you can simply go to tgrahambrown.com to find more information about this brand new album, also about T. Graham. But T. Graham Brown, thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Oh, it's great to be here, man. You were naming all those names off. It's kind of like a rogues gallery, it sounded like.
Well, I wasn't exactly sure I could get through. It's so many collaborations that you've had. And T. Graham, I want to get into that album and the releases that you've let out so far from this album. But let's talk about, if you don't mind, your introduction to the Grand Ole Opry. Now, this is an experience that few people will ever experience, but you were recently inducted officially by Vince Gill, and you had your wife, Sheila, standing beside you. So could you just explain to the audience, what is that experience like?
Golly, it's hard to describe, man. It's the biggest thing that ever happened to Sheila and me. It's just wonderful. It was a wonderful surprise. Vince is a 40-year friend of mine, and he's such a icon, himself. And to have him ask me to be a member and then also induct me, it was just wonderful, man. It's just, hey, it's the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, and I know there are probably thousands and thousands of performers that would love to someday have that experience, and of course it comes down to just a very few getting that opportunity. And I just wanted to ask you, your behind the scenes experience, because again, that's an experience that few people will get to experience. So let's talk about your new album, From Memphis to Muscle Shoals. All of these collaborations, and I mentioned them in the introduction. How did you decide? How did you decide on the songs? How did you decide, well, I want to sing with this individual or that individual? Take me behind the process. How did this come about?
Well, it started in the 60s. I'm 69 years old, and I grew up in the 60s with a transistor radio glued to my ear. A lot of people listening and watching probably won't even know what a transistor radio is, but it's a little radio, the one I had, about this big, I guess, a little black it was a 6 transistor. And I just walked around with that thing, right there listening to, it was an AM radio. Back then there was no FM. And so I would listen to the top 40, whatever was playing, the Beatles, Stones, Paul Revere and the Raiders. And also they were playing all the top 40 soul things, Otis Redding. Grew up about 70 miles from where I was from, so I always loved Otis Redding, and Sam and Dave and Wilson Pickett and Aretha Franklin and, all those folks. And I had been wanting to do a tribute to those guys. And so we sat down, my friend Billy Lawson down in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, co-producer, he and I would just tried to whittle down the songs we wanted to cut. There's so many that we couldn't get to. I'd love to be able to do volume 2 because there's just so many. And we wanted to record songs that were either originally cut in Memphis or originally cut in Muscle Shoals. So that's why the title From Memphis to Muscle Shoals, that's what that's about. And so there's so many hits that were cut at Stax Records in Memphis. Al Green was on a label called High Records. So there was just a ton of hits cut in Memphis. And then you go down to Muscle Shoals at Fame Studios down there, and starting with Arthur Alexander, You Better Move On, that's the song Little Anthony did with me. That was the first hit to ever come out of Muscle Shoals in 1960. I think they cut it in 61. It might have been a hit in 62 anyway. There, Percy Sledge cut down there, Aretha Franklin, just so many soul artists came out of Muscle Shoals also. So, yeah, it was kind of tough whittling them down. And then we cut 14 tracks, and it didn't start out to be a duet album. I was just talking to Dwight Yoakam. Dwight and I, our first album came out the same year, and we've stayed in touch, since 1985, 86, something like that. And Dwight was asking me what I'd been up to, and I told him we'd cut all these songs, and he asked if I had cut a song called I'm Your Puppet. And I said, yeah, man. Matter of fact, I did. And turns out that's one of his favorite songs. And he asked me if it was okay if he sang on it. And I said, yeah, man, of course. And so he went in the studio in Hollywood and cut his duet vocal. And then he went back and sang harmony on everything. He really went to a lot of trouble to do it. And once that happened, I thought, man, maybe I ought to call Tanya up and see if she'll sing on something. And so she said yes. And I went out to Texas and recorded her in her living room, singing Dark End of the Street. And then I thought, man, maybe Wynonna would be good on this Al Green track. And she said yes. And so we recorded her. And then I called Sammy Hagar and asked if he would sing on this funky old Rufus Thomas song, Walking the Dog. And he did it out at his house in California. And I just started calling people I liked that I thought would do a good job on this song. Randy Houser's a current country artist singing Dock of the Bay with me. And I have a Christian friend, Zach Williams, who's a big Christian act right now. He's a real soulful singer. I got him to sing When a Man Loves a Woman. And Delbert McClinton, one of my all-time heroes. I recorded him here in Nashville on Mustang Sally. And Sam Moore from Sam and Dave, I've been knowing him about 35 years. He's a great friend. And so we went down to Miami where he lives and went into a studio called Criteria Studios down there, a real famous studio. And got him on a song called Who's Making Love. And then little Anthony lives in Boca Raton, so we went to Fort Lauderdale, a place called the Power Station, and got him. And Eddie Floyd, I was so blessed to get him. He wrote and sang the song Knock on Wood, and we'd cut that. And so he went to Muscle Shoals and put a vocal on that. And so it just kind of, Bettye LaVette, who a lot of people aren't familiar with Bettye LaVette, she's a great soul singer, grew up with Aretha Franklin. She's originally from Detroit, and she went in the studio in New York City and did a vocal. And so it just kind of turned into this duet album. It wasn't really meant to be that, but it's a really cool record. We went down to Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals and cut all the tracks in the exact same room that Arthur Alexander and them recorded. It's just really historic studio, and we used all Muscle Shoals players and Muscle Shoals horns and singers, background singers from down there. A lot of people don't realize that I cut most of my country hits in Muscle Shoals using the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. People call them the Swampers. And they've pretty much all died off except David Hood, the bass player, is still alive. So David played bass on all the songs on this From Memphis to Muscle Shoals record. And it was just, we used some of the keyboards that were originally used in 1962. And so it was pretty cool to start with, and then to get all duet people on it. And, you know, it's kind of cheeky to record these things. I hope people take it in the right light, that it was meant to be a tribute album. I mean, how do you improve on Sitting on the Dock of the Bay? Well, you don't. Or Mustang Sally, or any of these songs are iconic songs. But we did our best to make this record sound like it was cut in 1967. We wanted it to sound vintage and authentic, and I think we did a pretty good job of it.
I think you did a fabulous job, and the two singles or the two cuts that I've been able to listen to from this album so far is the one that you mentioned, sitting on the dock of the bay, originally I think by Otis Redding, and also "Take Me to the River" that you did with Wynonna, originally recorded by, you mentioned again, Al Green. My gosh, and T. Graham, you've been asked this probably a million times before, but your voice is so soulful. It's so unique, and you can hear your voice, and it's like no other voice I've ever heard. Is the influence of the Al Greens, the Otis Reddings? It's got to be an influence for you to craft your voice over the years. You can just hear that. You want to speak about that?
That's just the way I grew up, man. I guess I've always sang like that. The first real band I ever heard. Our backyard, we lived in this little bitty town with 300 people in it. As a boy, I spent my boyhood years down in South Georgia in this little town, and the railroad tracks divided the town, and all the white people lived on one side and all the black people lived on the other side. The first band I ever heard with drums and guitars and all that, when it was hot in the summer, I would raise the window in my bedroom. And I had a screen on it, you know, and I would lay down at the foot of the bed, my head at the foot of the bed, to get a breeze coming through. And the first band I ever heard was the Black Church across the tracks. I mean, I could throw a baseball and hit this church. And so that was really the first R&B kind of music I ever heard. And then, like I said, I listened to it on the radio. And when I got to the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, I started singing for a living in 1973. So I've been doing this for 51 years. And the first band I ever had of mine was a soul band. So I sang soul music for 9 years in Athens, Georgia. And then my wife Sheila and I moved to Nashville in 1982. So I've always had one foot in R&B and gospel and country. So it's kind of a mixture of everything, man. And it's not some conscious effort or anything. I think that's just the way my mind processed everything.
Well, God's definitely blessed you with a gift, certainly with your voice, and it comes out from your soul. And I wanted to ask you this question, and we've got a few minutes left. You've got an incredible song, I think, that you wrote or it came out in the late 90s, and the song is "Wine into Water," and it's kind of a self-reflection maybe on your life. But can you speak about this amazing song that you wrote many years ago, "Wine into Water," and how it's affected you, how it's affected others, and folks that are struggling maybe with addictions? Talk about this song, if you would. And we've got about 5 minutes left.
Well, we wrote that song about me. It's funny. My co-writer on that song, Ted Hewitt, sent me a version. He's producing a new country artist, and they recorded "Wine into Water," and he sent me a version of it yesterday. It's funny. We wrote that song about me. It's about getting sober. I had a drug and alcohol problem, and through the grace of God Almighty and the love of Sheila Brown, I was able to finally get sober and stay sober. And that song, it never was a hit, but somebody posted it on YouTube years ago, and it's had millions and millions and millions of views. And what it's turned into is this recovery song. It's gone around the world. you can go on there, and every now and then I'll go on and read some of the comments people have left, and people have said that song's helped them get sober or helped them stay sober. All it is a prayer to get sober. That's what the song is, Wine into Water. And it's just been used in rehab centers, churches, recovery groups, AA meetings, everything. There was one lady commented that she was going to kill herself, fixing to shoot herself, and she turned on the radio and Wine into Water came on and she changed her mind. I've had a couple of people tell me they were going to kill themselves, and then they heard Wine into Water and they changed their mind. I got a message, believe it or not, from a guy in India. There's a film, there's a place, they call it a film industry in India called Bollywood. Mm-hmm. And a guy from India made a movie called Grace after he saw the video of Wine into Water, and all it is, the Wine into Water is the theme song. It's in a language called Mizoram, and it's all about drug deals going down, suicide, and all. It's a heavy-duty movie, but it's in the end, it's a story of redemption. So that song has just taken on a life of its own. And I did the Opry the other night, and I had a guy come up to me and said, "Man, that song got me sober." So I hear that all the time. I mean, I hear every week, no joke, every week at least somebody comes up to me and tells me it's helped them, or we'll do a show, and after the show, I'll do meet and greets, and I have people come through the meet and greet line telling me it's helped them. So just to be part of something like that's awesome, and I'm just glad God is using that song to help people get straightened out. And Sheila and I, my wife Sheila and I, have been together 46 years, and our personal ministry is to help people get sober. And also I speak about mental illness. I'm really bipolar, and I was able to get treatment for that. So I urge people that are mentally ill, don't have any mental issues, or anybody in their family or friends to find a good doctor, because they make medicine now that can alleviate the symptoms. There's no cure for it, but it allows people to live a normal life. So, mental illness still has a negative stigma about it, but it's no guilt in it, or it's not like a personal failing or anything if you're mentally ill. So I urge people to get treatment for that. So we just Sheila and I just try to help people get straightened out and save people some trouble. That's all.
Well, God is definitely working through your life to do that. It's obvious. And thank you for sharing about your faith and how God has changed your life. And if you want to find more information about this brand new album by T. Graham, it's From Memphis to Muscle Shoals. I highly encourage you to go to his website, which is tgrahambrown.com. And place that order. I think it's out on vinyl too. I think I'm going to order that. Yeah. But T. Graham, I'm going to ask you to stay on just 30 seconds post-interview, but I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about your life and your new album today.
Well, thanks for having me. And also, I'd like to remind people, visit our Facebook page, because we keep it up to date, and there's tour information and all kind of cool stuff. By the way, today is World UFO Day. So we posted a picture of a UFO and asked, "Do you believe?" And we've gotten a ton of comments on it. It's funny. But anyway, thanks for having me on the show, and God bless you for what you do, and God bless the United States of America.